Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Babu's Frickin' Podcast. It's Star Wars Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us live in a galaxy far, far away. My name is Mike Chiatti Ruby, and as always, I'm joined by Grand Moff Mark Valentine. Aside from bringing us a banging new intro song there, what did the Wookiees bring you for Life Day, bud?
Hello there. So no presents from the Wookiees. I was out cleaning up dead stormtrooper bodies in the front yard. That was what that's what Mala had gifted me for Life Day. We talked about that on our last episode. Who was going to be on body detail? It was me. It was me, man.
Way to take one for the team there, bro.
So
rounding out our Jedi Council, as always, none other than Brian Porkins Lee. Any New Year's resolutions, Brian?
To obtain a VR headset. That's what I would go for. Mala's VR headset.
Yeah, just don't be rocking any of that content from Itchy Man. That might get you in some trouble.
I feel like our countdown timer was like ripped straight from the Star Wars holiday special.
I thought the same thing, dude. As the kids say, that thing slaps.
The jam.
So,
all Apple Beats, man. All Apple Beat Loops. That's it. That's all Apple. Thank you.
Thank you, Apple. Now, typically, we record every other week, but for the next 7 weeks, we'll be coming at you live at 8 p.m. on Star Wars Sundays. And why? Because we have a new live-action Star Wars every week in the Book of Boba Fett on Disney+. So every Sunday night, tune in on YouTube with Mark, Brian, and me. Loving the threads there, Bri. And we're going to go through all the high highs, the low lows, and all the Easter eggs that we can uncover in the Book of Boba Fett. So to everyone who is here joining us live and in progress, thanks so much for joining us here on the YouTubes. We're excited to take your questions and incorporate your ideas into the conversation. Mark will be minding the chat, and will help to bring your voice into our three-way panel here. And as always, you'll be able to listen to the audio version of this podcast wherever you love to find your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, MySpace, and Napster. Maybe not the last two. So,
maybe not the last two.
So tune in, like, subscribe, and best of all, share and tell your friends if you like what you hear. But that's enough of the business. In the words of Qui-Gon Jinn, these negotiations will be short. Let's get into it. It's time to return to the twin sons of Tatooine and get jiggy on the sands of Mos Espa with the Book of Boba Fett. Gents, let's just start with our initial take on it in the words of Brian from your Earth's Mightiest Weirdos podcast. And in the phrases of Cold Stone Ice Cream: do we like it? Do we love it? Do we gotta have it? Brian, we'll start with you. Like it, love it, gotta have it.
I'm at love it at this point. There was a little bit left to be desired, but I think that's kind of the point of what this first episode was doing. I actually am glad they didn't reach for a Grogu level reveal right off the bat, because that would have been really hard to replicate. I'm at love it status right now, but I am obviously coming back for more.
Excellent. Mark, how about you, man? Like it, love it, gotta have it.
I was the gotta have it on the panel. So I suffered from insomnia that night. I woke up at 3:30. At 3:30, I fired it up. Before any of you had woken up, I had already watched the Book of Boba Fett 3 times. I have done it 6 times in total. I absolutely love it. I love Robert Rodriguez. I love Tamara Morrison. I love the tempo of it. For me, like Brian just said, I was happy that we didn't need like shiny objects in the first episode, that we didn't need a baby Grogu level reveal to keep me interested in it. And I am more interested in a slow build. And Robert Rodriguez, Jon Favreau, you've got me. You had me at hello.
I'm somewhere in between you guys. I mean, I think I gotta have it. There were a bunch of moments that had me really up and excited, jumping out of my seat, especially one of the moments at the end of the episode we'll talk about later. But I think I'm the oddball out on this one. I wanted my Grogu moment. I wanted something at the end of the first episode that just hooked me into what was going to happen next.
You got Baby Goro, not Baby Grogu. You got Baby Goro.
I did get Baby Goro. Well, I was about to say that was my freak out moment at the end of the episode. You know, it was, Shang Tsung yelled, "Finish him." That Rodian bit it in the dust. It was exciting.
Rodians always bite it in this universe. They're such a maligned species.
Yeah, well, that one deserved it.
He did deserve it.
Those Rodians got some serious potty mouths too. Like, I swear, every Rodian we meet, Like, they need to have their mouths washed out with soap. I wouldn't be surprised if in like off screen, like that Rodian who was pals with Anakin when they were kids,
Yeah.
that kid probably got in some serious trouble for foul language.
And let us know in the comments. This is a new thing that we have a live audience here. Let us know in the comments. The same thing, Cold Stone style. Did you love it? What did you like it? Did you love it? Did you have to have more of it? Let us know what your initial thoughts were on the Book of Boba Fett. We love interaction. Again, if you have a question, let us know so we can bring it up on camera. The show's all about doing deep dives and answering those questions you might have. This is our water cooler moment for the week. We've waited now since Wednesday, so we don't feel bad about spoilers. This is your chance to get it all out. You don't have to feel bad about spoiling the episode and get any questions or just get any vitriol out that you have. We'll do it all here.
Yeah. Now, and there's a whole lot to get into. We're going to touch on a lot of it, but I think to be safe to say, we're not going to do a full recap show here.
No.
We're not going to get into all of the minor minutiae. You know, that's what our viewers and listeners have Disney Plus for. Go watch the show. It's awesome. But we want to get into some of the meatier stuff, and it doesn't get much meatier than the belly of the beast, the Sarlacc monster that resides in the great pit of Carcoon in the Dune Sea. As Brian smartly predicted a few episodes back, they actually got right into it. They started with the mystery of Boba's survival explained, but
Patton Oswalt scooped him.
Yeah, this was foretold in the great prophesy of Patton Oswalt. Parks and Recreation is officially Star Wars canon, so we're going to cede the microphone to Patton Oswalt filibustering on Parks and Recreation as he describes the return of Boba Fett.
Franchise if he were to write this opening scroll. Then, pan down from the twin suns of Tatooine. We are now close on the mouth of the Sarlacc pit. After a beat, the gloved Mandalorian armor gauntlet of Boba Fett grabs onto the sand outside the Sarlacc pit, and the feared bounty hunter pulls himself from the maw of the sand beast.
Okay, this is exactly...
And we realize that he survived his fall during the battle at Jabba's palace ship. Then do a hard cut to a repurposed Imperial destroyer.
So first, points for Maw. Second, points for nailing it shot for shot. You know, clearly there's some Parks and Recs fans working on the Book of Boba Fett. So Mark, excellent screen grab there for those who can see it, with his armored gauntlet pulling himself from the maw of the sand beast. Mark, tell us about this Pepto-Bismol moment 40 years in the making.
So I don't know why. This is what happens when you watch shows at 3:30 in the morning.
3 times in a row.
Yeah, that the first thing that went through my head was the Pepto-Bismol commercial. That, like, for the Sarlacc, I'm like, when you get nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, and then it's like Boba Fett. Like, he straight up destroys the Sarlacc's gastrointestinal system.
You just called the man diarrhea, is what you just did.
He is. He kind of turned into that, because if you look at him as he gets expelled from the Sarlacc, well, it's a forced expulsion. It was kind of, it was like a Pepto-Bismol commercial. Well, you don't want to have a Mandalorian with working armor and a blowtorch inside your stomach. That's just a cautionary tale for every other thing. So think about this now, guys, though. We're 2 for 2. We've seen a Krayt dragon destroyed from the inside by another Mandalorian, a foundling, if you will. But now the Sarlacc is also undone by the indigestion that is Mandalorian warriors. So don't swallow a Mandalorian. Just don't do it.
You need some serious space probiotic if you're going to down a Mandalorian. But to be clear, he wasn't ejected. He came out from the side, right? So it wasn't a clear, like, I'm vomiting up the Mando. Like, he kind of came out at an angle, because he turns on. I think it's probably best if we actually explain what happened for anybody who's trying to imagine this. So, Mark, how did he get out? Where did we find him? How did he survive? And then how did he blast his way out?
So I'm more interested in what's impressive is, I mean, he's cutting through tissue with the flamethrower. That was cool. I want to know, how far did Homeboy then tunnel after he gets through the stomach wall of the Sarlacc to get above the sand? Because that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, that was what was more impressive to me, was to see the hand, as Patton Oswalt jokingly says, emerge from the sand and then pull himself up. And then he collapses. Like he's done for, so much so that the Jawas take care of him later on. The cool thing about this was, almost universally, no matter how people felt about the episode, this was, Mike, you talk about this, to borrow a phrase from Michael Ruby, this was fan service done right. This is the kind of fan service that you want from Favreau and Filoni and Rodriguez, men who clearly understand the fan base, and something that we have been clamoring for decades. For 4 decades, we have been clamoring for that shot, and they did it in a way, albeit Patton Oswalt joking about it, but they did it in a way that made almost every single Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi fan happy. So there's not the reason why, but to do or die. I don't care about the why. I'm just glad I got it.
So, Brian, did it live up to your expectations?
It was what I expected it to be. It was nothing earth shattering. Like, it's not like he used his jetpack to like fly out of it or anything like that. It was about as easy as you imagine it being. And I think pretty similar to the story they told within Legends canon as well, of how he survived that way anyway. So it's the only thing that made a ton of sense, like actually seeing the inside of the Sarlacc pit and learning the breathing apparatus of a stormtrooper was kind of cool. And him kind of making his way through there, I thought was really interesting stuff. We knew we had to get the answer, and it was, I mean, for lack of a better term, the easiest way of making it happen. So it didn't like light the earth on fire for me, but it worked just fine.
It just lit the Sarlacc stomach on fire.
Sarlacc on fire.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I dug it. And you pointed out the Stormtrooper. I loved that it rung true to C-3PO's description of being digested over the course of 10,000 years in the belly of the Sarlacc. That who knows how long, as Mark would say, who knows how long Homeboy's been chilling out in the stomach lining, that there's a Stormtrooper that just happens to be within reaching distance of Boba Fett, that he's able to go. He can pull his oxygen tube out and pull a little scuba maneuver to get enough air to give him the energy to get back out.
Dude, well, how amazing, though, that in the previous episode, we said just that. Like, how does one die in the belly of the Sarlacc? If you die or get digested over the course of 1,000 years, very cool that the answer is asphyxiation. You die of the lack of oxygen. That's what kills you. So the anatomy, that's the thing, is it's not just the escape from the Sarlacc, but haven't we all, like as kids, let us know in the comments, am I the only person in the world that wondered after the Return of the Jedi, like, what was it like inside of that thing? Like, it used to scare me as a kid, looking at that pit with fangs, wondering to myself, I wonder what's down there. And that was like a big what if that I had. Now here we are in the first shot, the first moments of this, and we get those answers. It was fan service done right.
Well, and the details are what got me as well. So there's Jabba's barge in the back. And then I don't know if you guys noticed this, but somebody in another video I watched called this out. There's a severed Sarlacc limb in the upper part of the frame, or as I want to call it, Lando's limb. Because remember, there's the limb that has Lando around the leg.
There it is.
We can see it. You can see the limb there, which Han shoots. He says, "Look, higher, just a little higher," and then he shoots it. That's the limb that's there. That for me is a killer Easter egg.
The limb was cool. I talked about this on another program over on the Florida Park Explorers Network. I like the smoldering rubble of Jabba's sail barge. That this shot was really cool for me to give us a sense of the time that this was being played out, and the fact that the heap was still smoldering and we still had that wreckage as an active wreck gave me an indication of when this series starts in terms of the time frame. This has to be a few hours later.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the only thing that could have been an even bigger geek moment would have been if you saw the sand speeder flying out of frame with carrying Lando and Han and Luke and Chewie and Leia and the droids. Because it's right after. But clearly it was long enough that the cowardly Jawas had enough time to roll in afterwards. So overnight, the Jawas roll up, and I'm sorry, like, it doesn't matter what planet they're on. Like, Jawas are just dicks, guys. What's up with that?
That Jawa said, F around and find out. I mean, he did not play around. The Mandoverse has not been kind to Jawas. I would say the Star Wars franchise has not been kind to Jawas, but in The Mandalorian, we see Jawas getting murked by Mando for no reason, just destroying the Razor Crest, unlike an orbital blast. They did more work to that Razor Crest than an orbital blast could. Sorry, if it's too soon, Brian, I'll relent on the death of the Razor Crest. I know you have the Lego set.
I love that ship so much.
I know you do, and I'm so sorry, but they were getting murked and disintegrated. They did get like the Jawas did strike back when they shocked him off of the Sandcrawler, which was just a moment of comic relief. But now, like for no apparent reason, instead of offering Boba Fett a drink and maybe a ride into town, they straight up looted him for his armor, and for good measure, they just leave him for dead with a butt of a rifle, and they leave him to the pit of Carcoon or what's left of it to clean up the mess.
They strip his armor off of him, and then they give him a fresh one just for trying to hold on.
We had a lot of people that wondered. So that's that connectedness too, to connect the tissue to the Mandalorian. That is the same group of Jawas that loot him. Then Cobb Vanth is going to find that armor inside of that Sandcrawler. He's going to take possession of that armor. And the last time that we then catch up with Boba is this middle part of the story where he is with the Tusken Raider community, and then he's going to try to reconnect with his armor and with Slave One. So we're going to get, I think, some of that story in the future of this show.
Yeah, but before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go back for one quick second, because the show opens in a pretty cool way in that it immediately establishes who this is by showing very quick clips of Boba having nightmares. So we find Boba Fett lying in a bath, and he's having flashbacks all the way back to childhood, all the way back to Camino and the rainstorms with Slave One up on the platform, and then a flashback of him holding the helmet of his fallen father, Jango Fett, and then we go into the pit. And when he wakes up, he says to Fennec Shand, "The dreams are happening again." So clearly, here's a guy who's been haunted by the trauma of his life over the last 40 years. And I thought it was great how they grounded all of this by immediately bringing us Episode 2 and Return of the Jedi straight away, and it was like, this is Boba, and it's everything you've had with Boba. What are you guys thinking of this kind of flashback? You know, whenever he goes back in the tank, we get like a Godfather 2 style thing, which is something I called out a couple episodes ago, where you get his flashback mirroring whatever he's thematically experiencing in the present day.
Yeah, I mean, that all really worked for me. Honestly, the thing that stood out to me the most is that he told Fennec Shand, like, hey, it's happening again, which he hasn't even spent that much time with Fennec Shand on screen, but he saved her from certain death after the 5th episode of The Mandalorian season 1.
Your favorite?
Until we reach, I do not like that episode, but until we get to that point, when we meet her again, she's like full robot on the inside and everything else, but he trusts her. And I can't imagine he's got a lot of people in his life that he trusts. But this entire setup, I mean, we even see him when we see him in the first episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian. He's got scars all over his face. Like, that back to bath is doing the right work that it's supposed to be doing. And I think that's honestly the coolest part of the whole thing for me. It's a cool back to bed bath that he probably sleeps in every night. I think it's awesome.
Mike, growing up, you and I were huge fans of Robert Rodriguez. So we know that the man has a lot of experience with flashback sequences. I thought of like El Mariachi. I said this on the other show too. He knows how to simultaneously deliver flashbacks in that they complement the current narrative and the trajectory of present day. And I thought the same thing. El Mariachi does this really well. A lot of his works do this really well, that the flashbacks or these sequences are so seamless in that they become a part of the narrative, as in like what you are watching is very relevant to what we're then getting on screen. The first episode did this, I thought, really well. And we had 2 periods where we had 2 different flashbacks. And I thought that that was a really cool way to end the episode, to see, I mean, because this whole thing, we're going to get into this later too. The whole thing was about tribute, and the whole thing was about respect. So it was really cool to see him earn that respect. And albeit it was a small tribute in the form of, I don't know, we'll call it like a sand truffle, whatever that thing was that they had water out of. But that was the tribute that was paid to him. That, like, that dude, the chieftain, knew that that little kid didn't murk Sandgoro, even though the kid comes back running, taking credit for it. Boba Fett is a man who, throughout the course of his life, has earned respect. He's earned everything that has been given to him. So this episode was centered around a man who, the very beginning of his narrative to now, has had to fight and scrape to earn his way and to claw his way through the galaxy. And fitting that it connects back to Django, who says, I'm just a simple man trying to make my way in the galaxy. And that too is what Boba has always been about. Ironically, that is discordant with what he is now going to want to become, which is the daimyo of Mos Espa. That who he has been up until this point has been a man who has just tried to make his way and do whatever it takes to get to that next day and see the next thing. Now he's at the top, and it's a very different experience for him. And he doesn't, he's kind of uncomfortable there.
He's not just uncomfortable, he's not good at it. Like, no, I mean, that, which I find very interesting. That one of the things that I really enjoyed about this, and I think they're smart to have to set it up. Yeah, we have a question coming in on how many episodes there are gonna be. There's gonna be 7. So this was one of 7. They've got to give us somewhere to go in these 7 episodes. And so if he was immediately a badass from the start on this, it wouldn't give us much of a journey. So there's a big difference between being the hired gun and be the guy who's hiring the guns. And we see from the beginning, we learn that not only are there crime syndicates throughout the galaxy, but apparently the entire economy and governmental system of Tatooine is a feudal crime system where there is government, but there are crime lords, very, very much like the mob, who are ultimately in control. And you mentioned the word daimyo, which is like a Japanese feudal lord.
Japan.
Yeah, and that's the title that they've given that was Jabba the Hutt, and then was Bib Fortuna, and is now Boba Fett. And it's interesting, after he gets out of the Bacta, the first scene we get are a number of criminal interests and a quote-unquote major domo for the mayor of Mos Espa.
Amazing.
Who come to bring tribute to Boba in order to earn his protection. So including a Trandoshan, a rather nasty Trandoshan who brings a Wookiee pelt.
Voiced by Robert Rodriguez. He voiced that Trandoshan, by the way. Fun fact.
Well, I mean, for me, Mark, this is your moment to spout your favorite hashtag. I mean, I was just reminded with the Wookiee pelt of Rio in Solo talking about, you've never had a better sleep than in the lap of a Wookiee.
Yes. So that line completely rung inside of my head. It lives rent free in my head. So when I saw that Wookiee pelt, that was the first line I thought of, was from Rio, voiced by Jon Favreau in the Solo movie. I'm a huge fan of Solo. So anytime that those kind of things like reverberate back in my brain, I'm a big fan. Very dark though. Like that was, at first I'm like, is that a bantha pelt? I'm like, oh no, that's a Wookiee pelt. And then I immediately went to our musings about like that Wookiee was someone's mother. Maybe it was Mala. You don't even know.
Jeez, man.
I got dark real quick.
Why'd you have to go there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I went dark real quick.
Well, I'm gonna go a little darker. I mean, it wasn't that big of a pelt. It's probably much more like a lumpy.
Lumpy. With his human teeth.
Yeah. And then, so the Trandoshan wishes that Boba will never leave Mos Espa, which is a wonderful it's a wonderful, not so veiled threat. Everyone who comes in the door, I saw a great meme on this as well. Everyone who comes in the door, the first reaction from Fennec Shand is, "Can I kill him?"
Yeah. Oh, she's
like
wonderful.
It's like a light breeze, and Fennec's ready to pull the trigger. What was your take on the offers of tribute from our fantastic snide major domo, as well as our 2 crime lords?
Go ahead,
what was your take on them, Bri?
Isn't that Julia Louise Dreyfus's husband from Veep? The guy that played the Major Domo?
I
I'm
believe it
almost
is.
positive. Yeah, I'm almost positive. Like, I've never seen such an American like in the entire Star Wars galaxy. Like, John Boyega was super American, even though he's not, but he just seemed like he was straight out of like Virginia. I thought he was hilarious. But the fact that the mayor, so I've got a question for you guys. Do you think the mayor is somebody we know?
Well, the mayor is also voiced by Robert Rodriguez, and he's we've seen him in the trailer. I'm trying to think of the species that it is.
Hammerhead?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
I was just gonna say I can't remember specifically what the species is. I'm having a brain fart in this moment. I'm apologizing, but we're live, so I don't want to have dead air to all the people that are watching. But he's the hammerhead that is sitting in the chair. We see him in the trailer as well. So I am speculating that in the second episode, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, we will meet the mayor. We will see the Major Domo again. They're going to follow the space ninjas back to the mayor. Clearly, that was the delegation that was going to revisit later.
Right.
When the Major Domo says, apologies, and you'll be greeted again. Clearly, that was no surprise that's the delegation that was meant to greet them again, are the guys with the space shields and the electro rods.
I have taken an odd approach to this series. I have only watched each trailer like one time. I haven't really dove into them a ton because I was Spider-Man, like that had all my attention. That was part of it for sure. But I also dove way too much into the Spider-Man stuff ahead of time. So I was trying to be a little bit more calm when it came to this series. But the Trandoshan, like even when a Trandoshan pays you a compliment, it sounds like a threat. I thought that was fantastic. The Major Domo that he wanted a tribute was very interesting. I find it very, very, very interesting that all of the money being given is all New Republic credits, even though they're not under the New Republic. They're out on the Outer Rim. I don't know. Is Tatooine in the Outer Rim? Either way, it's not part of the New Republic.
It is in the Outer Rim. It is.
The Outer Rim.
Yeah. So, I mean, but all the New Republic credits is very interesting. This has only been 5 years post Return of the Jedi. Around that time, maybe 6 or 7 at this point, depending on how much time we've covered in The Mandalorian. But it's interesting. And Boba Fett, when we talk later on about how he's a man, he wants to be a man that walks on his own 2 feet, and he needs to. I think the club owner really likes him. I think he's really trying to go out there and do his thing.
Yeah, Jennifer Beals.
There's obviously people like that Trandoshan. Like, I think he might have been trying to pay respects, but has anybody ever been the boss of somebody that they used to work for? Because it is a little bit awkward. So
I think what you could get, and gentlemen, if we could round table this for a second and asking in the comments for those that are watching, who do you think that those space ninjas came from? Do you think it was from the Trandoshan? Do you think it was from the mayor or someone that we've yet to even meet? I've had some people who've said to me they thought it was from Jennifer Beals' character, that she was way too nice, and it was a distraction, that she may have conscripted them as well. I think the way that this is going to play out is, Mike keeps on referencing, and I think appropriately so, is The Godfather. That I don't think anyone is really happy with him taking over and displacing Bib Fortuna. I think that with Bib Fortuna there, it was an entity that they know. Now you have this wild card coming into the situation who's vulnerable. Let's face it, if you were to look at Boba Fett and you were with some of these other crime bosses, what would you do in this situation? You would shoot your shot. Yes, he does have an assassin by his side, but he has an assassin and 2 Gamorreans. Not exactly menacing. I think everyone is going to shoot their shot. We've already seen him at a table filled with Trandoshans. So I think it could be, at this point, anybody. My money's on the mayor, but I'm curious to see what you guys think. Who's trying to get him?
I think it's somebody who's not. I think the odds may be that it's somebody who's not even someone who's been revealed to us. It may be an entirely different faction, whether they're on Tatooine or not.
We have a great question right now.
The question, what was the Trandoshan Bosk, the bounty hunter? Bosk is also a Trandoshan, but this one was named Doc Strassi. We don't know if he has any sort of relation to Bosk or if he's simply just the same race. We've seen Trandoshans multiple times in season 1 of The Mandalorian as well. So not all Mandalorians are Bosk, but I would bet that we get Bosk in some sort of flashback at some point in this.
Trandoshans, not all Trandoshans.
So for the record, the Hammerhead is an Ithorian.
Thank you.
So that's who we're looking at. And interestingly, as again, I think, I don't know which one of you guys called it in an earlier episode, that most of the trailer footage that we got has already been used in episode 1.
We said that though.
That's what I'm saying. I'm giving you guys a shout out for being super smart on that. Like, the only things that we really haven't seen yet that weren't in episode 1 were the table with the other gangsters, including the Trandoshans and the Ithorian authority figure.
Yeah, but not
10 times fast.
Yeah, not to give us too much credit. It's something that's been repeated. Both seasons in The Mandalorian was the same way. That the footage that we saw from The Mandalorian was pretty much spent by the second episode of the season.
Yeah, but just to finish off the bit at Jabba's palace. I mean, you mentioned his 2 Gamorrean guards. These guys used to work for Jabba, then they worked for Bib. It was pretty fun that the guy who was introducing all of the tributaries is the former torture droid for Jabba the Hutt. So if you remember the Gonk droid who's upside down getting his feet burned in Return of the Jedi. And on cue, Mark Valentine, well played, sir. There he is. And he's shocked when Bib doesn't want to shock or torture anybody.
For those fans of What We Do in the Shadows, the voice of the torture droid is done by the famous Matthew Berry, who is a riot. Because of the appearance of this droid, it has prompted a rewatch of What We Do in the Shadows on my part, which I love, which is on FX.
I am Jackie Daytona.
But Boba's not good at this daimyo thing, so he won't let anyone carry him into Mos Espa, so no one recognizes that he's an authority figure. He won't torture or kill anybody for getting out of line, despite the droid urging him to do so, despite Fennec asking him to do so. He doesn't want anything special when they walk into Jennifer Beals' establishment. Looks like it's some sort of casino. And that's right. It is Flashdance Jennifer Beals, the L Words Jennifer Beals. What a feeling. She is there. And it'll be interesting to see how much she comes back. You don't really get a bona fide star.
Let me just say, it's not easy to make Twi'lek look good. She makes Twi'lek look good, man. She really does.
Yeah, well, you talked about Kim Cattrall and Mannequin a couple episodes back. I think Jennifer Beal and Flashdance for others of us may have been
the theme of the episode was The Force Awakens.
Yeah. So my question with this is, do you guys think that this is going to be a tragedy or redemption or a fall to the dark side? Because with Boba being he used to be the ultimate badass in the universe, and now we're finding he's a little clumsy. And so it begs the question, at least from my perspective, are we going to see him ultimately fail because he's so stuck on trying to be respectful and he won't go dark? Or will he go dark? Or will he actually succeed in being redemptive? Well, Brian, you've got I'm curious. You've got an interesting smirk. I'm curious what your take on this is.
Every time I think about him being redeemed, I think, we got the exact same face in Mando season 2, episode 6, where when he brings that stick down, when he's going for the kill, he gets the crazy look in his eye, and there is no getting that out of him. So I think it's going to be a turn to the dark side that does end up resulting in tragedy, whether that happens in a limited series of 7 episodes or we get a second or third season. I think eventually we're headed to, I think we're headed to like Sopranos level, like dark death tragedy.
So he's going Michael Corleone here.
I think so. I hope so. I think that'd be the most interesting.
Mark, what do you think? Where are we going?
If Star Wars and the sort of the equation, or if the pattern is to be followed again, if it is a story of redemption, it does not bode well for him. Because generally when the bad guys are redeemed, they die. We've seen this time and time again. So if Boba is redeemed and becomes a good guy, it's not looking good for seasons 2 and 3 of the Book of Boba Fett. For that reason, I'm hopeful that he does not become a good guy. Interestingly enough, you talked about the helmet before. I talked about this on the other show. The helmet, when it gets knocked off by the street ninjas and it falls and tumbles to the ground, I think is intentionally meant to mirror the fall of his father's head and Jango Fett's head. And obviously, with the money, I really think there's a lot of symbolism in that that is foreshadowing that if Boba continues down this path, that it may also not end well for him, that his father was a man who chased fortune to his own peril, and he didn't worry about what side he was on or what, what ramifications, like the way things played out. He was just a man who was out for himself. And I think if Boba does that, I think that what it's foreshadowing is if he continues on this path to stay as the Lord and the Daimyo, I think it's going to end badly for him. I don't think we're going to get Boba Fett in the future of Star Wars. I mean, I think that this is meant to be an end and a fitting end to his story. I'm hopeful that it ends in some kind of sacrifice or something, the greater good. But it might be very much like The Godfather. This might be a tragedy of epic proportions.
I don't want a full-blown redemption, and him killing Bib Fortuna in the manner in which he does at the end of season 2 of Mandalorian, it's not the same as Han Solo shooting Greedo. It's not. It's killing him in cold blood to take over the crime lord throne. You'd have to do a ton of work to convince me. Wanting for somebody to speak in respect and everything else. I mean, plenty of crime lords do that. It doesn't mean they're good people because they allow people to speak freely when they're their hired assassin. But I'm not, and part of this is very much my want for Kylo Ren to stay Kylo Ren and not become Ben Solo again.
Yeah.
I thought it was far more interesting. I did not want the redemptive story of Kylo Ren. So if we're going to do it all over again, I don't know, man. Like, it's the same, like as Mark said, it's the same Star Wars formula. If he does get redeemed, he's gone immediately. I think there's far more interesting story in the anti-hero or even like just the straight up crime lord of, again, he kills Bib Fortuna, who's clearly not going to be able to put up much of a fight. I mean, he's Big Fortuna, so there's not much that he's going to be able to do at that point. But at the same time, he's got a heart. Like, he saves the kid later at the end of the episode against Goro, and we'll talk about it. But I don't want a redemption.
I just wonder, does his heart stay or does his heart go? Because right now he's saying, look, I need to go on my own 2 feet. I'm going to show you respect if you show me respect. And I just wonder whether, it's very Machiavellian, better to be feared than loved. And, Fennec says it herself. She's like, look, when in doubt, fear always works. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, he's just not feeling it. So we got to go back for a second because you guys have touched on it twice. We got our first space ninjas. We don't know who sent them, but a crew of red-clad space ninjas came and attacked them in the square of Mos Espa, and then they were chased through the rooftops in a pretty fantastic action scene by Fennec Shand.
Parkour.
Yeah, except all I could hear in my head was Michael Scott. Parkour!
Parkour!
Parkour! What did you guys think of ninja throwing stars?
Just waiting for somebody to fall through a refrigerator box.
Space parkour, and also Gamorreans finally not looking like total buffoon pigs when they fight. Those Gamorreans, that was a bet that paid off well for Boba.
Well, whoa. Did Gamorreans look like fools? They went up against Luke Skywalker. They just got choked out. I mean, we didn't really see them fight other than they walked up, they crossed the vibro axis, and then he just
but I thought they even looked goofy when they were doing like their whole WWE thing in the first episode of Mando's second season. Like, they looked pretty like.
No, not really. Go back and watch it. It wasn't that bad.
Nah, man, they were like
I'm on Ruby's side here.
Stud.
I don't know. I didn't think it was that awful in season 2 of Mando.
I don't know, man.
I will say there was one thing that did frustrate me with the Gamorreans is the second or third or fourth time I watched the episode. They walk out of the casino and they're right behind Boba, and then all of a sudden we get a wide shot and they are gone. Like,
well, maybe
too. Where'd they go?
Well, maybe they were getting watered and fed at that moment. Jessica Biels said to them, or Jennifer Biels,
they left the casino with him. Like, it was it was as dumb as Kate's mom killing or running Kingpin through that wall. They might have been
in the process of being. Would you like your Gamorreans watered and fed? maybe they
No, I believe it was
exited.
hosed down and fed.
Yeah, hosed
Like, it's
down.
not even so polite. It's like your bros. There, you got some walking 6-foot stinky pigs. Like, we'll take them out back and hose them down for
Yeah.
you.
We have a call for probably the best thing that we got from the cantina from our friends Florida Fanatics, who says, "Can we please talk about how Max and Droopy survived Job's
Well,
barge being destroyed on their way
that
back
was
from Mos Espa?"
Yeah, I was gonna finish off the ninjas, but since we're already there, we talked about him a couple weeks ago. It's the triumphant return of
Of the
Max
king.
Rebo. He obviously survived working at Jabba's palace. He's not just playing space bar mitzvahs anymore. He's got a steady gig weekly at Jennifer Beals Flashdance Cafe. And he's apparently he's got a buddy from the Cantina band who has taken the Cantina theme full on mariachi. I listened back at it, Mark. You were right. That is the Cantina theme
It is.
being played mariachi style.
It is, which was really fun because again, it's a blending of Rodriguez's cinema roots and a lot of the time that he spent with Desperado and El Mariachi. That was a perfect marriage of Star Wars and his early cinematic work, man.
Dwayne, it's Jennifer Beals, not Jessica Biel. Two different people.
I'm just so glad I said this earlier in this week. I am so glad, Max. Thank you so much for not taking the gig on Jabba's sail barge that day. He decided against, and he took another gig, and it was such a smart move on his part because, it's like the clerks thing. Your politics plays right into it. He did not take the job that day. But
No,
for
it's
Eagle,
like those guys who, he's like Jack, unlike Jack, he shouldn't have gotten on the Titanic. He stayed off.
I get it. For eagle-eyed viewers, you may notice too that our beloved DJ Rex, we don't know if that's DJ Rex, but it's the same type of droid, makes his appearance in Jennifer Beals's cantina as well, dealing what looks like sabacc. So if you're a fan of Galaxy's Edge, you probably geeked out a little bit at that as well.
Well, and then all the astromech droids continuing to serve drinks the way that they had R2 serving drinks on Jabba's barge. Interesting that these astromech droids that help people navigate at light speed and do battle. Yeah, like it's interesting to see that they get repurposed to serve drinks. We got a comment here about being scared of the piggies.
Florida
Horrible
Fanatics. I was scared of the Gamorrean guards as a kid. Now they are a joke. They look horrible and not feared.
Jokes
Yeah.
strong.
I don't know. The way that the granted, you're fighting a Rancor, but the way that that Gamorrean went out like a punk at the mouth of the Rancor, I was never really scared of them.
Squealing, literally squealing like a
Squealing
pig.
like a pig. Squeal, piggy. So what?
Is Oga's a chain bar? Dwayne says in a comment. Yes.
Oh dear.
Oga has franchised.
So last thought on the battle here. What did you guys think of the ninja fight? How did you feel about the choreography? Seeing Fennec throwing some badass kicks around.
It was cool. I was very happy to see Mortal Kombat come to the Star Wars universe, not just with Goro, but also with a variant of Sub-Zero and Scorpion and what was it, Lizard. So it's nice to see. Yeah, Reptile. It's nice to see a little representation of Mortal Kombat in the Star Wars universe.
I was far more invested in the roof chase scene, the Indiana Jones chase scene, than I was the fight. I thought the fight was actually a little bit slow, a little bit too methodical, for lack of anything else. I just think everybody on screen is just a little bit old and just moves a little bit slower. But
yeah,
I was far more interested in that rooftop chase scene. I mean, she then dives off the roof and then ends up in front of him. Like, I'm good with that. I thought it worked just fine. I think acrobatic Fennec Shand, I'm here for it. Just her being a super assassin is super exciting. Seeing her character, what she's capable of, not only what we've seen in Mando, but more so what we've seen of her in the Bad Batch, and just how much of a capable assassin she is, but how loyal she is to Boba Fett is far more interesting to me. The fighting, I honestly could take it or leave it at that point. I'm
with you. I agree. I expected a little bit more from some of the fight choreography, but more than that, I was shocked at how weak Boba came off. Here he was just an unstoppable killer when he's taking out the stormtroopers in Mando, And then suddenly a bunch of ninjas show up with some laser shields, and he can't seem to get out. And then by the end, we've learned that he's got a bit of kryptonite on him. Homeboy's got to go back to the bath every night, or he doesn't fare so well. And it, on the one hand, I like that he's got a bit of a weakness, but on the other, I was just shocked to see him get his butt handed to him so quickly by a bunch of palookas.
I think part of that is the element of surprise, though. Like, I think that was a lot of it.
See, it took me until like the 5th or 6th viewing till I really started to take umbrage with some of the elements of the fight. First and foremost being that he uses basically an explosive at like point blank range, that he fires a rocket at point blank range into the shield. He's got a jetpack. I would think that as a person who's, used all of this equipment for the entirety of his life would notice, oh, I'm surrounded by a phalanx of shields. I'm going to fly into the air, albeit 10 feet, and fire a rocket behind one of the walls of said shield. Like, I that was on the first viewing. I thought that, but it didn't really hit me that I had a problem with it until the 6th time, because you see it again and again. You're like, why didn't he just fly up? I mean, is the rocket not working? It didn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And I get that they probably wanted to have it be a little bit more like anxiety inducing than have him just like waste through these guys, and to show that he is very vulnerable. But it's just kind of, it's very dissonant with what we know. Like Mike just said, we just saw him tear through an entire legion of stormtroopers to be surrounded by these ninjas. And even though they were waylaid, he's much too adept at fighting than to allow that to happen. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I guess they got to give him someplace to go. But I think that what's interesting will be seeing him get built up over time as well. So learning how to use the gaffy stick, learning how to get even more badass. Which then takes us to the big chunk of the episode that we have left to talk about, which is his initial time with the Tusken Raiders. And it's interesting, let's get biblical, gents. The book of Boba Fett seems to be a reference to playing it like the Bible, like the book of Genesis or the book of Ruth.
Yes, sir.
The title of the first episode is Stranger in a Strange Land, which is citing from the Bible. And the beginnings of his adventure here very much mirror Moses going into the desert, and there are Egyptian themes that play in the music. Yes. Shout out to Ludwig Göransson again. Like, that guy for me is now top 3 composers doing film and TV for me, up there with John Williams and Hans Zimmer. The score just totally kills it. But there's a whole lot of Egyptian 10 Commandments stuff going on. Even down to the way it's shot with him being dragged through the desert and walking behind the banthas in single file to hide their numbers, by the way. Excellent detail and Easter egg again there. So Mark, you seem like you want to dive into the Tory here. So
dude, I was really chomping at the bit. It was like the second viewing, and the focus on there was just so much iconography in this. And so, I mean, like we got a lot of this from season 1 of The Mandalorian. Jon Favreau, Robert Rodriguez, they're students of film. So as masters of their craft, so much of these guys is about paying homage. So much about George Lucas was about paying homage, that the samurai are basically the Jedi, that George Lucas fashioned so much of the mythos of Star Wars upon what was already there, and he basically expanded upon that. Robert Rodriguez is the same thing. He's a student of cinema and he's a student of film. So the title of this, A Stranger in a Strange Land, is taken right from the Old Testament, Isaiah. Isaiah 2:22, where it says, I've been a stranger in a strange land, referring to the early years of Moses, who grew up in Egypt. The quote then inspired a science fiction novel in 1961, and that's Heinlein. And the name of that book is A Stranger in a Strange Land. It's not a coincidence that works its way into the title of this film. It's there for a reason. And if you watch, so much of the shots of this seem like they were intentionally lifted from the 10 Commandments, from Boba being outfitted and putting the armor on like he was one of the pharaohs and the princes of Egypt. Even the narrative of him once being a part of an empire, even though he's not a member of the empire, he comes to learn that as an outsider of the empire, he's going to go through like a transformation. And where does that transformation come from? The wilderness. Much like Moses is exiled into the desert. We see too, Boba Fett is exiled into the desert. He's drugged behind the bantha. He goes through this like metaphysical change, and his time with the Sand People is that change, which is going to change his outlook on life. Because remember, the next time that we see Boba, he's going to be a very different Boba Fett from the man that we meet in Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back. Philosophically speaking, he's invested in saving the life of the child or Grogu. He's a man who understands honor and takes and saves Fennec Shand, spares her life, takes her on, becomes her closest, and she becomes his closest ally. So the man that we know in The Mandalorian is a very different man that we are when we were presented in 1979 and 1983. This story is very mosaic in its origin of looking at a man. I don't think it's going to, and some people were asking me if I think it's going to be like a straight rip of the trope. No, I don't. There's no exodus here happening. He's not leading people out of exile. It's paying homage to that film and that style of film. You see like the glyphs all over the city of Mos Espa. Mos Espa itself looks very Egyptian in its structure and in the architecture. Even the concept of being carried in and out of town reeks of ancient pharaohs, and how ancient pharaohs did not walk. They were gods amongst men. And how now that he's gone through this change, he rejects that way and he's forging his own path, much like Moses did once he went through this change. But I think it's just really Robert Rodriguez's way and a love letter to cinema to say, these are the type of films that inspired me. This is the kind of cinema that inspired me. And whether it's Rodriguez or Quentin Tarantino and Jon Favreau, these guys have love letters to the films that inspired them as children, and as filmmakers, they always find a way to put them in their stories and storytellings as Easter eggs. And that was so much fun to see these things.
And it's not going to stop because we know Robert Rodriguez is directing 2 more episodes. Everybody else gets 1. He gets 3.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good question, which is Boba good? Right? We always thought he was the ultimate evil. And then we find out that he's got this honor after. But even in this middle period, one, he spares the kid. The kid keeps whacking on him, and then ultimately he saves his life, taking on the reptile centaur. But then on top of that, he offers to save the Rodian. So when he's captured, the Rodian are captured. They're both tied up. They're being guarded by the Sand People's lizard dog. And when Boba cuts himself free, he looks and he says to the Rodian, "Would you like me to cut your bones?" Like he's genuine in it. And then later, I guess Space
spares
PETA,
the child.
Well, he spares the child, and then I guess Space PETA, to show that he's the bounty hunter with a heart of gold, he apologizes to the dog when they're back out in the desert again and says, "No hard feelings, mate." So. Yeah. Is Boba actually we talked about this a couple episodes ago, even from when he felt sympathy for his clone brethren in the Clone Wars cartoon, is Boba actually a good person? And if he's going to get dark as a daimyo, is he really going to have to get dark to get past what's there? So long-winded question with a lot of examples, but is Boba fundamentally a good person who's going to get even gooder or not?
I think that's what makes this show interesting. Is Mike and I we quote Quentin Tarantino films all the time. He's trying real hard, Ringo. He's trying real hard to be the shepherd, and that's who he is now. He's not a good guy, but he's trying real hard to be a good guy. And I think so much of that is that he's gotten a second chance. And a lot of storytelling, especially coming out of Star Wars lately, is all about that second chance and making the most of it. That, no one's ever really gone, that everyone can be saved, that no one is beyond redemption. The Star Wars community is like ablaze with, is Anakin a good person? I mean, we've thrown that around here a billion times, that he saves his son, but is that act alone enough to redeem him of the thousands of people that he's killed as a Dark Lord of the Sith. Like, these are the fun things. This is what we geek out over here. It's not just, hey, like, he shot out of the Sarlacc. These are the things that make Star Wars so much fun for us, the viewers, is the Book of Boba Fett. And so many of my friends who hated it, I'm like, are we watching the same show? There's so much going on here with this guy and the transformation of a character that only had 6 minutes of screen time. We are getting such a great story around this guy going from someone who loses his dad to being mixed up with the wrong people to then making different decisions because he's given another chance. And I think we got good stuff on the way.
Yeah, but Brian, in the words of Star-Lord, is Boba good, little good, bit of bad, or a bit of both?
He's a bit of both, and that's what makes it so interesting. Like, that was part of the whole thing of, and Derek says Anakin is a good person, kind of like Thanos is.
Snap.
And I mean, how many times have I seen Attack of the Clones? I don't quite understand what Jango's entire deal is and why he hates Obi-Wan, and I'd never been able to kind of wrap my head around it. So I think just from that reason, because his dad and how much he loves his dad was portrayed as a villain, we don't really think of him as a good guy, but he's not necessarily a bad guy either. So he's just kind of a hired gun.
So he's not a bad guy. He's just a bad guy.
Thanks, Satan. So we
Satine.
And that's part of the whole, I hope we don't go redemptive arc, because we don't necessarily need a redemptive arc. We just need an arc of whatever that might be. I like the I have a heart and being willing to save the child and look great doing it. He's super menacing. He's clearly gonna kill somebody. But I mean, if I have a dream, and I said this on our episode previewing the show, if I have a dream, it's him going full dark because Mace Windu shows back up and he gets his chance at revenge.
I'm just going to go on record now. Let's at 9:00 here on Sunday, January 2nd. If I get Mace Windu, you might be getting calls at 4:00 in the morning, one or two of you, because I don't know what I'll do. I will lose my mind.
If you call me at 4 and not that wake me up, and you spoil it, I'll lose it.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of opportunity for continued huge Easter egg moments. I mean, if you think about, we can have flashbacks into moments during Empire. We can have flashbacks during moments where he's young. We can have him when he's ultimately in trouble. You know, if he's really bad at this daimyo thing and he needs a little bit more backup than Fennec, if you're gonna start a ruckus, you call Forlom and Zuckuss, and we could see the Sinister Six come back from Empire at any time.
Wouldn't that be phenomenal? Wouldn't that be phenomenal if we got Bosk and IG-88, Zuckuss and Forlom, Dengar? I need to see me some Dengar.
We need some head wrap action.
We do.
But it's also interesting to think that, they're setting up season 3 of The Mandalorian, to potentially be retaking Mandalore. And you wonder, like, is Boba taking himself out of the equation? Like, it's like, nah, I don't need Mandalore. I got Tatooine. I got this.
Oh, absolutely. He says that the Empire turned it to glass. He has no interest in that.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah. So I think the last thing to touch on before we carry on and get ready for next week's episode is we've talked about it throughout the episode. There's a fantastic fight scene. This was my biggest geek out moment in the episode, is the emergence of, we've been calling him Goro. There is a lizard centaur. He's something like Gorn from Star Trek or Goro from Mortal Kombat. He's a 4-armed giant lizard that the Rodian accidentally uncovers under the sand of Tatooine. So he's yet another sand creature, like the Sarlacc or like the Krayt Dragon. And he goes buck wild, kills the Rodian, starts whipping Boba around.
Fun fact about the Rodian, portrayed by Sam Witwer, who's the voice of Darth Maul in the animated stuff. Just found that interesting.
There is nothing
we get a Kenobi. We need that. Yeah, we need Brian for next week. Preload into a Roadcaster, a Kenobi yell, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we did get a mini Wilhelm scream in the episode when one of the ninjas got beat up. It wasn't a full on one, but it was a mini one.
That one we might have preloaded.
Yeah, but Yes, but I thought the fight was super exciting. The dog tries to get into it. The kid stabs him in the foot, and it doesn't work so well. And Goro's about to kill the kid when he gets Jabba the Hutt choked out
Yep.
by Boba Fett, and then they take his head home. And as you guys said earlier, the kid runs around as if he took the head. For me, we've said this on a number of episodes that creatures are one of the biggest things
Yeah.
that make Star Wars. This for me was the single most exciting thing in the episode because it was something we had absolutely never seen before.
Yeah.
Totally new creature, totally unexpected. This for me, despite not having that big Grogu reveal, this is the thing that got my blood pumping. What did you guys think?
So Dwayne says, I've never seen or heard of this creature. Was this the first time we have seen this? Yes, Dwayne. This was new. Robert Rodriguez created this creature. They still, believe it or not, have not named him. I'm sure they will soon, but in the subtitles, it just calls him the sand creature. Mike, to answer your question, now that we've kind of answered one of our viewers' questions here, I love the creatures. There's a reason that the second episode that we did of this podcast was just that we picked our favorite creatures from the Star Wars universe. Creatures are what makes science fiction. Unusual and unique flora and fauna is what makes it something that's extraterrestrial. So whenever we get a new creature, something like this, I geek out. And my reaction was the first thing that Dwayne said was, this is new. We've never seen this creature. And I immediately went to the Star Wars Codex to look to see if we had anything like this. And when we talked to like Alex, he's, and Justin, they kind of said as creators themselves, one of the things they did was to try to find things that were somewhat obscure so that in the Wikipedia, their works were listed amongst, other things. So Robert Rodriguez is going to be the first sighting of Space Goro. We're just calling him, if we called him like Baby Yoda, we got to call him Space Goro for at least a few weeks until we get some kind of official name. So Space Goro it is. I deem you Space Goro henceforth. And I love you, Space Goro.
Honestly, for me, I mean, I geeked out over it. I thought it was I thought it looked good. I thought the callback of choking, like Leia choking out Jabba with the chain, is how Boba killed this one as well. But when we saw the moisture farm getting raided, for lack of a better term, and then leaving the vandalism on the side, I went straight to the Huttese alphabet because I know the Arabic alphabet. I can recognize it. I can't read it quickly, but I do know Arabic a little bit. But the Huttese alphabet, I was really hoping that they were putting a Z for Zero the Hutt, but unfortunately that is not the case. But they did leave that symbol is a K in Huttese, so we don't know what that might mean. There's a lot of growing sentiment that there is potentially going to be a Crimson Dawn in this series, because some of the themes from their theme in Solo as well as in the theme for this show kind of have some of the same stuff. Regardless, I thought the creature was cool. I don't know, but Mike, you said it. They didn't give us any massive reveals, and I was good with it. I thought that the village elder going, "Hey, this kid didn't kill Goro," and then finally explains how, one, Boba gets the gaffy stick, and two, how he's basically a Tusken Raider when we meet him in season 2 of The Mandalorian. But overall, I like that this episode answered all the pending questions in one episode. So we've got 6 episodes to really do whatever we want. Where did the armor go? How did he get out of the Sarlacc? How did he live? All that stuff, they've already tackled it. So I'm super excited where they're headed.
And you're the raiders that you were talking about, not the Tusken Raiders, but the ones who were raiding the moisture farm.
Yeah.
I've read and seen videos that say that that's actually the same gang that was terrorizing the town outside Mos Espa where Cobb Vanth is the marshal and has to defeat them. That it's actually the same crew.
Yeah.
The mining, whatever.
Yeah,
that would make sense. Yeah, that would make sense.
We'll see if that holds up, but that's where I heard that symbol was, but that could be just conjecture.
So, Mike, to steal the con from you a second, I'm going to turn it on you because you've been an amazing host today. And sometimes I know from experience that when you do it, you don't get to get a lot of your own thoughts out there. But I want to ask you your impression of the Tusken Raider, because he doesn't look like any Tusken Raider that we have ever seen. In all the Tusken Raiders that we've ever been introduced to, from the first movie, from the Phantom Menace, all the way up to the last film, this Tusken Raider chief and the tribe do not look anything like the other Tusken Raiders. Do you think that that is coincidence? Do you think that this Tusken Raider is special in the universe? He looks like he's got some, almost like he's got some clone armor on. Do you think that this Tusken Raider has any role beyond what we've already seen?
I look at it two ways. One, I'm getting some serious Thunderdome vibes from these guys. I feel like we're starting to see what happens when you get further out into the tribe. I'm not sure they're special as much as the people that we've typically seen within the Tusken Raider community have all been kind of the worker bees who go out to pillage and find things. We saw some kids and we saw some women. The women, the children, I slaughtered them all. We saw all of those in episode 2, but we've never seen a tribal chief before. So I'm not so sure that there's anything special about them other than we're starting to see a little bit closer to home within some of the tribes and what some of the leaders might look like. It could also be, to go a bit Avatar here, you've got the different tribes. They could all have different attire depending on what tribe of Tusken Raider they are. So I liked the fact that we started to see a little bit of hierarchy in the community order of the Tusken Raiders. I think it remains to be seen if there's anything more special about them. To me, it was just kind of like, hey, we actually have some time and money, and we're going to invest in diversifying these folks a little bit. And we've never really seen during the daytime a full-on, fully functioning Tusken Raider community before, and so.
Oh.
This may have been what the chief looked like, and he was like chilling out and having a smoke around the fire when Anakin buzzed in and took his head.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the Great Tusken Raider massacre of Attack of the Clones, we have not really seen anything of the Tusken Raider culture. So this was for people who will say like this episode was some people felt like it was wasted. I think that you got a lot of really cool classic answers to Star Wars that we've been wondering for a very long time, for decades, that we saw inside to review. We saw inside the Sarlacc. We had an age-old question answered of like what happened and when did this take place? And then we get to see these iconic Star Wars characters and the layers peeled back, and we get to see the curtain peeled back on how they live, how they survive in the vastness of the Dune Sea. And so for me, like, episode 1 ties up a lot of loose ends for us. But for me, as a diehard fan of the original trilogy, this show did check a lot of boxes for me.
For me, it checked all the boxes except for some big grand reveal, which is not going to stop me from watching everything else many times over. So I'm psyched and ready to go. I think the only question mark for me about the Tuskens, which was surprising, was Mando established that they communicate via space ASL. And I missed, that there wasn't sign language among them, and it makes me wonder where, if that'll come back, that there's sign language that that Boba will learn to talk with them, or if that's something unique in terms of how Mando was able to learn how to communicate with the Sand People.
I'm hopeful they don't spend a lot more time on his time with the Sand People. I hope that we just get it on face value that's it. I don't need to have this narrative drawn out slowly. I want, and we've said this before, I want to see Han Solo. I want to see other bounty hunters. I want to meet Cad Bane. To me, this show is going to be missing a big opportunity if it's not a true anthology of his life. If all this does is chronicle his time from the Sarlacc to when we find him in Mando, I think we've missed a gigantic opportunity to really take a deep look at the life of Boba Fett.
But I think you cannot tell that story without massive spoilery reveals, and that's why we started the way we did.
I agree. Good
and
stuff.
I can't wait for Wednesday, and then again, can't wait until this next week. I've been chomping at the bit all day to get online and talk Book of Boba Fett with you guys. Thank you so much for hanging in late. Thank you to everyone who joined us live. Again, we will be having Star Wars Sundays every week for the next 6 weeks as we chart our way through all 7 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. If you like what you've seen or heard, again,
Share
like,
it.
subscribe, and especially share it. We're really looking to build our community of fellow positive Star Wars nerds who want to come and share our love and get deep on this stuff. So we're going to keep bringing the fun. We're going to keep bringing the funny. We're going to keep bringing the Easter eggs. And we're going to keep bringing ourselves to the party. Brian, anything to add before we bail?
I was just going to say, small programming note, the numbers should get a little better next week because I won't scare off viewers. I will be off next week, so I will not be here. So these two are going to be able to hold down the fort. I will unfortunately be unable to join, but you can join Mark and myself tomorrow night on Earth's Mightiest Weirdos for the 2021 Tony Awards, where we're giving a Tony Stark statue to the best of the MCU in 2021.
That is awesome. Everyone tune in. We will pour out a little bit of spotchka for you next Sunday in your honor. Mark, anything else you want to add before we punch it into jump space?
Yeah, I mean, almost everyone that's here knows me and they know what we're doing on this Diz Life. I'm really excited. We're going to be back this week after a little bit of a hiatus for the new year. But share this show with a friend. We're trying to grow Bobby's Freaking Podcast. We started as Mando Monday. Share this with a friend. Share this with someone who loves Star Wars. We really appreciate that. And subscribe. Head over to podpage.com, babus-freaking-podcast. Subscribe everywhere you can find your podcast is where you can find us, hanging out every single week. 3 friends talking about Star Wars and loving every second of it.
Absolutely. Outstanding stuff, gentlemen. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to our live audience. Until next Sunday, may the Force be with you.
Always.